Hi, today we're going to talk about experience types. To get access to your experience types, you're going to go into the administration section and then in the operations settings. And under the operations settings, you'll see all of your experience types. You can, of course, edit an experience type by clicking the three dash menu here and clicking on edit. Or you can click on new experience type if you want to create a new one. And today we're going to create a new one. Now, automatically, we do choose which arcade our experience type is applicable in. If you have multiple arcades, you will need to click the enable arcade button, enable for VR arcades button here, and to remove them, just click the X button. A title is required. Anything with the orange underline is required. So we're going to call this one Escape Rooms. Under description, this only applies to when you're using a booking widget. So if you are using a booking widget, then you definitely want to make sure this is accurate. For the sake of this tutorial, we're just going to put an arbitrary description there. Charging is either by station or it's by experience. So if you want to charge one price for a booking without having it changed by number of stations, you would charge for experience. If you want to charge by the number of stations, so each station is a specific price, you choose charge per station. Book as show as book now option should generally always be yes, although this is an older setting for older arcades. So it is not necessary to have it in either, but I would suggest yes, as I think it may affect whether something will show up in your booking widget. Desktop communication is going to be important when you are using SynthesisVR to launch games, start sessions on your PC. This would be applicable for anything using SteamVR, that sort of thing. But if you're using something like a PSVR and you don't need this to track, or it's a virtual station experience type, then you would set this to no. But typically you want to leave this at yes. Position on list is something where if you want to have your experience type show up in a specific order when you're using the schedule option in your arcade section, then you'd want to number them appropriately. Typically, leaving it 5 should be sufficient unless you have a great amount of experience type that you want to have in some order. Under the Advanced tab, there's a variety of settings. Video recording on file. This would be applicable if you want it to automatically record, or you want to choose at the beginning of a session. If you don't use OBS, for example, for recording, you'd leave this as disabled. If you want to record it, depending on which station or session, if you want to do it session specific, you want to disable it but turn it on by the operator. If you always wanted to capture, then you would choose always capture. Please note, using this setting, the recordings are recorded or saved to your proxy/server PC. So make sure that you're set up correctly before you set this up. I tend to leave it at disabled, but can be turned on by operator. That way you can choose to do it at the beginning of a session. Only visible to admins should be relatively obvious. So if you're logged in as an admin, you will be able to see this experience type. If you're not logged in as an admin, and you have this set to yes, then you wouldn't see this experience type. If you have free roam in your arcade, then you want to turn this on for experience types that are free roam. So if this escape room was a free roam, I would want to set this at yes. And what happens is all the stations within that booking, if they're booking a free roam experience, will be booked. That means the other ones, if you're using 4 stations, the other 3 will not be booked. Now on the other side, experience type isolation, what that would mean is if you do have this experience type set up for free roam, if you set this to yes, then your stations can be booked separately for individual experiences. This would of course mean that they would not be available for the free roam if the free roam uses all 4 stations. So you can use those to mix up the stations for both types. Available only online, of course, would be if you want an experience type that is only available to be booked online. This just removes it from somebody being able to start it, your operators being able to start it from your arcade section. And it's also good if you're doing separate bookings online that might have different pricing, you might do that. Pause session on HMD idle would mean that if somebody hangs up the headset because they need to go to the bathroom and it's idle for a specific period of time, then the tracking, or not the tracking, but the session will be paused for that time until they get back. Automatic station allocation. So what happens normally when somebody books is the system does not automatically assign the stations. But if you want it to automatically assign the stations, whatever happens to be available next, then you're going to choose yes, and that will do that. Keep in mind this is experimental, and so your mileage may vary. Floating end time just allows you to extend time beyond when you are closing. So if you are closing and you want to still book something, this will allow you to do that. This will allow you also to extend time beyond the closing. So normally if you're closing based on your rules and you try to extend, the system will tell you you can't because you're closed. So this allows you to do that. Intro and outro videos will be played at the beginning of a session and or the end of a session if you want them to be played. It needs to be a URL, so it's not something that is played locally, and it needs to be a WebM video that is played. So you'll need to convert the videos to WebM. Enable SteamVR dashboard. This allows you to either turn it off or turn it on, meaning that if somebody, if you don't want people to access the dashboard, if you want to lock them into a game, then you want to make sure you turn it off, and that way that will disable the SteamVR dashboard. So when they press the whatever system button is necessary on your controllers, they will not get the dashboard. Or you can always have it on in case of an experience that may turn it off for some reason. Generally, do not change is the best way unless you're certain that that particular experience type would do that. This would be useful for, and as an example, escape rooms where you don't want them to change games, so you can turn that off. Purpose for touch screen interfaces. This is not for everybody, and we won't talk about this too much, but if we direct you to use it, or if you're an arcade that might need it, we will talk to you about that. Allow running in demo mode. So we have a demo mode that is an experience type that you can use to have essentially the station always operating and always showing your games. You can turn this on, and then when you're setting it up, when you're setting up the access point, you can turn on demo mode, and it will and pick the experience type, which would be one of these, and then you would then be in demo mode. Typically, you'd have this off unless you know you want to put this in demo mode. You can also set up allowing customers to choose a game when they're booking online, and this will allow you to have them do that in that. And then book confirmation templates. This would be the web templates or email templates when you are mailing a confirmation email, so you can choose which one. Again, typically you'll probably leave it a default template, but if you have a specific one, you can choose a specific one that works for you. And last thing are limits. So limits lets you choose the number of stations that might be limited for this experience. So minimum number of stations should of course always be 1, because you want to be able to book 1 station at least. Maximum number of sessions, in this case we're creating an escape room, so I would probably want to limit it to 6 stations, which is the maximum number of stations that I use in experience types, or it could be 4 if you're using the Ubisoft ones. And so that's the maximum and minimum number of stations that a customer can play. Difference in minutes on a calendar just isn't in terms of staggering. So if you want your booking times to start at, let's say, 10 a.m., then 10:30 a.m., 11 a.m., etc., you would choose 30. If you want it to be 10 a.m., 10:15, 10:30, then you would choose 15. If you want it to be on the hour, then you would do it at 60. So your bookings can only be made at 10, 11, 12, etc. 30 is a good number to start with and allows you to see what works. Complete station bookings means that if I've assigned this experience type to more than one PC, more than one station, then when somebody goes to book this, they will book all the stations. Now keep in mind, if I choose that this number is ignored because if I've assigned it to more than 4 stations. So if I've done 5, 6, 7, then it will book all those 5, 6, 7. So use this knowing what these are. I should also note in here, if I put this at 0, there would be no limit on the number of stations, except for the number of stations you have this assigned to. So right now, like I said, I'll do it at 4 because that's the most I want. Define specific number of allowed stations. So if I click on it, that will of course bring up an option down below, and I can click on the X to edit that. But in this case of Ubisoft, for example, in escape rooms, I might choose 2 and 4. So when the customer is booking, their only options are going to be 2 stations or 4 stations. So this will limit the specific number of stations that I want. Once I've entered in everything and I click on save, that will of course save the experience type, and it will take me again within the operation setting of the experience type. And from here I can assign it to my stations. And remember, I do have 1 to 4, so for this case I'm going to use 4, and I'm going to save, and now I'll book it on 4 stations. I still have no rules, and I would need to create a rule, and that is in a separate video. But at this point I may create a duration-based rule, or depending on the controls of the game, I may create a game-based rule, and there's a select number of games I might do with that. And that is the operation settings for experience types.